Welcome to the Great Basin Seasonal Outlook for October through January. Over the last 30 days, we've seen generally above normal temperatures across the Great Basin. However, we have had some below normal temperatures further north into Idaho. We have seen cold fronts move through the Great Basin, which has dropped temperatures to well below normal at times over the last 30 days, but overall temperatures averaged above normal. Precipitation generally was below normal across most areas of Nevada, Utah, and Idaho and Wyoming. Some exceptions were parts of far western Idaho and far northwest Nevada, where cold fronts brought some precipitation, and also where we had some monsoonal moisture and areas of low pressure moving up from the south that brought showers to Utah, the Arizona Strip, and far southern Nevada. Looking at our precipitation the entire water year since last October 1st, 2020, you can see below normal precipitation really across much of the West, as we have seen plenty of drought conditions and very dry conditions from last winter all the way through the spring into the summer months. Currently, we don't really have any significant incidents in the Great Basin. We do have a couple of large fires up in central Idaho, the Boundary and the Mudlick, but those are pretty much getting wrapped up. So generally, any large fire activity that has been fairly active has been off to our west and to our north. Soil moisture has improved across much of the eastern half of the Great Basin with some monsoonal moisture this year and also recent cold fronts. We still have some fairly dry areas along the Sierra Front and also over parts of central Idaho, which are in the lowest percentiles for soil moisture. Currently looking at some of our ERC charts as of the end of September, we have seen ERCs come down recently, however, are still above normal across much of central Idaho and across much of Nevada. Some of the drier spots are parts of central Idaho where ERCs are just dropping below record highs for the time of year, and also along parts of the Sierra Front. Again, they have dropped below record highs for the time of year, but are still well above normal with the recent very dry conditions. Areas across Utah, most of Utah, at least the eastern and southern half of Utah, ERCs have dropped down to below normal with the moisture, and you can see really we've seen some of that moisture off and on for the last couple of months across Utah. Looking at our current 10-hour fuel moisture, we have fairly dry conditions across much of Nevada and Idaho, and our 10-hour fuels more representative of our grasses. However, we don't have much fine fuel loading across much of Nevada up into Idaho or western Utah. So again, even though the fuel moistures are low, we don't really have much fuel, at least with respect to grasses at the lower elevations. Looking at our 100-hour fuel moisture, we have certainly seen some improvements with the recent cold fronts. We're now seeing most of the Great Basin between about the 6th and 15th percentile with respect to 100-hour fuel moisture, and this is really an indication of fire activity across the Great Basin. Typically, when 100-hour fuel moisture is low, we have much higher fire activity. So the fact that this has been increasing really compares to our decrease in fire activity. Some of the wetter conditions obviously over the eastern portion of Utah. Similar conditions in our 1,000-hour fuel moisture, although we are still seeing areas of the Sierra Front and areas of central Nevada, or central Idaho rather, that are still at record lows for 1,000-hour fuel moisture. So still fairly dry conditions in our timber areas at the mid and higher elevations. The Evaporative Demand Drought Index shows more of our short-term changes in drought here over this last week. We did have a cold front move through the Great Basin in late September, and this brought much colder temperatures and some precipitation, along with an increase in humidity to many areas. So we did see some improvements in our shorter-term drought, really in all areas of the Great Basin. The only exception would be over parts of the Sierra Front into Northern California. Again, that's where those areas did not see much moisture and just some cooler temperatures, but still some significant drought conditions. Looking at our longer-term drought, we still have a large area of exceptional drought over parts of southern and eastern Nevada into parts of Utah and also over parts of central Idaho. However, again, this is still a sharp decline in the area of exceptional drought that we saw just a few months ago. We still have a large area, most of the area, in extreme drought. Some of the exceptions are over parts of northern Nevada into southwest Idaho and over into eastern Idaho, and then also over parts of the Arizona Strip that have dropped down to either moderate or severe drought. But still obviously drought ongoing across much of the West, and this is likely to continue. We may see some improvements over parts of northern areas of the Great Basin as we see an increase in cold fronts moving through as we go towards the middle of October, which will probably last a couple of weeks. So now that we've looked at our past conditions, we'll go into the future a little bit and look at La Nina and El Nino. These are model representations of currently where we are. We are in a weak La Nina, or really been trending out of neutral conditions, and it looks like most of the projections is to see some cooling in the ocean temperatures as we go into the winter and early spring months. So we will likely return to La Nina in some fashion over the winter months, and that would typically be more indicative of storm systems targeting the Pacific Northwest and the northern tier of the country, which would also be skimming northern areas of the Great Basin and would largely leave southern areas of the Great Basin on the drier side. So we'll see how that materializes going through the next few months. Looking at the 8 to 14 day outlook, taking us from October 8th through the 14th, and you can see cooler temperatures expected and above normal precipitation. Again, we are expecting an increase in cold fronts to move across the Great Basin going from mid to late October, bringing both cooler temperatures, windy conditions, and also some precipitation. Looking at the 4-month outlook from October through January, again showing those cooler temperatures and wetter conditions in the north as those cold fronts increase going through the month of October, with drier and warmer conditions more likely in southern areas of the Great Basin. As we move into November and December, really that similar pattern where the storm systems tend to target the northwest U.S. and the northern tier of the country, bringing those cooler temperatures and precipitation. This will dip down at times into the Great Basin. Right now, our better chances of any above normal precipitation will be across parts of Idaho into far northern Nevada, again, still leaving the southern areas of the Great Basin largely on the drier side going through the next few months. We will be watching into January to see if we have a better chance of these storm systems starting to drop into the Four Corners area, which could bring an increase in precipitation to much of the northern half to 2/3 of the Great Basin. But again, this is still fairly far out, and right now it's still looking like a drier signature for the southern areas and possibly some moisture and cold fronts for northern areas. So putting everything together, really that just means we will likely see normal fire potential across the Great Basin over the next several months. We still could see some fire activity pick up along parts of the Sierra Front or even central Idaho off and on as we see some drier periods going into the early part of October and also an increase in winds ahead of these cold fronts. However, with the moisture increasing going towards mid to late October, we'll likely see a lot more moistening of the fuels in the far north across Idaho going through October and also possibly at times along the Sierra Front. However, precipitation that far south will likely be a lot more minimal than what we'll see further north. So we'll likely see a gradual end to fire season as we move further south, just due to longer nighttime periods, shorter daytime periods, and cooler temperatures. So that concludes our seasonal briefing for this month. Check back next month for the latest updates.